Welcome, everyone, to the AI Risk Reward Podcast. I'm your host, Alec Crawford, founder and CEO of Artificial Intelligence Risk. And today, our special guest is Hannah Darley, co-founder and chief AI officer at Geordie AI. Welcome, Hannah.
Hello, Alec. It's so lovely to be here. Thank you for having me.
Well, so excited to have you on the show. Anyone who thinks about risks of AI is a friend in my book, but I want to rewind a little bit first. Tell us a little bit about what you did in school and what you did after you got out of uni.
Well, mine is an interesting background. So I actually went into government work straight away when I was 18. So my uni work coincided with my early government career. So I was in intelligence operations for just about 10 years, worked across the US, UK, NATO, and a lot of other really fun projects. But I actually got both of my degrees whilst I was working for government, mostly because I lacked the funding to do it on my own. So luckily, government was more than obliging to trade me from some work for some education. So my background is in international politics and psychology. I've got my master's in psychology, so I actually use it all the time and I love it. But yeah, my early career was very much immediately plugged into some of the most interesting and complex problems from a governmental perspective. And how do you measure data? How do you test a hypothesis and prove it? And so some really interesting, some really complex but interesting initial kind of career experience.
Yeah, that's great. So tell us a story from that time. Obviously leave out the names of the innocent or whatever, but you've got to have a good story.
I have quite a few good stories. I can think of some interesting fumbles in a briefing where I said a country's name incorrectly, and it was very problematic. It wasn't just a simple stumble on a podcast. I can think of some early experiences where you were justifying the difference between keeping an intelligence source or not. And really heated debates, and it was really interesting. But I do always want to caution people that you hear like intelligence operations, you're like, wow, but I always compare it to astronauts. Like the job sounds really cool, but day in, day out, if you ask them what they're doing, they're going into a building, they're sitting in a little like spherical spinner, and they're going like this for about 12 hours. So it's not as exciting in James Bond as it sounds on the tin. But I had a lovely time. I think the most interesting thing that I got to do was teach some of the structured analytics courses, which for me is fascinating. Like, how do you actually go about proving your point? And not just thinking something and therefore deciding that it's fact, but actually with evidence, how do you prove something? How do you question your own assumptions? How do you think about the future? So how do you start to analyze alternatives? And, if my main theory doesn't happen, what about other things? Like the example I always give is everybody talks about the big tech competitors, like Microsoft and Apple and all of them kind of continuing to dominate the space because they're too big to fail. And a very great question to ask in terms of alternative futures is, what if you're wrong? So what if they don't? What would happen? And just opening up the ideas. And that was all really great for me and very formative to how I solve problems now.
Amazing. That sounds great. And you mentioned before the show, Daring Greatly by Brene Brown. Tell the audience about that book.
I love that book. So a lot of Brené's work is kind of social anthropology. It's really focused on vulnerability and belonging. And I think sometimes that doesn't always make it into like leadership conversations or isn't always the first stop. You kind of think of it as your personal growth rather than your professional growth. But actually, I found a lot of value in focusing on vulnerability as a leader and not only knowing what you don't know, but also being willing to open up and talk about how ideas could change, and if you need to pivot, what that looks like, and just not being afraid to expose yourself in areas that you're not as comfortable or areas where you're not an expert, really being maybe not humble in the sense that you are kind of self deprecating or making yourself small, but humble in the sense that you're happy to take other people's perspective. Because I think one of the most interesting things about problem solving is diversity of thought. So yeah, huge fan of Brené's work, huge fan of vulnerability in leadership. And I think it's one of the things that has helped shape me as a leader. I hope it has anyway.
Ah, that's great. Awesome book. Did you have a particular mentor as you were either in government or after government in terms of learning and growing as a leader?
I think I've had a lot of mentors over the years. It's a really interesting study came out. Sorry, I reference psychology stuff all the time. You'll just have to forgive me for it. But a really interesting study came out about the role of fathers in communities and how if you don't have a father in a household, other people in the community will basically step up unbeknownst to them and fill some of those roles or jobs that the father would traditionally do. And I kind of think of mentorship that way. Like there were very few times where I had sort of an assigned mentor-mentee relationship. I did some coaching down the line, but it was very much the case that I had a lot of mentors in the way that I just interacted with people. I took notes. I liked things. I didn't like things that I would do the opposite way, things that I thought they handled really well. So I ended up having a lot of mentors, but I don't think they would have known that they were mentoring me. And it's something that I've tried to really focus back on in terms of how I enter into a mentorship relationship with people and also how I advise people around coaching. Like, I think it's really great if you can have a mentor, but actually you're going to pick up so many tips from so many people that I wouldn't worry if you haven't had a mentor up to this point, because you probably have, you just don't realize it.
Yeah, well, that's pretty cool. So getting to Geordie AI, tell us the origin story of the company as co-founder and chief AI officer there.
Yeah, so it's actually named after a mining lamp during the Industrial Revolution. So everybody knows we're in the AI revolution, we're in the agentic revolution now. And all throughout history, especially during technological revolutions, we've needed new technologies to help us navigate the risks associated with innovation. We want to unlock innovation, we want all that powerful potential, but we also want to minimize human suffering. We don't want people to have any sort of harm come to them based on that innovation. And so in the Industrial Revolution, one of those areas was around mining lamps. So coal was a critical resource. It was one of the main ways that all of the amazing inventions from the Industrial Revolution were powered, whether that was, electricity or steam or anything like that. But actually, as you chipped coal off the walls of mines, flammable gases would build up and they were invisible to the human eye. And so there was all this hidden risk associated, but it was necessary for innovation and for inventions and the future progress that was so needed at that time. And so all over the world, there were mining lamps that were invented, much like the Geordie lamp it was in Newcastle, the northeast of England. And basically what they did was really simply, they put a candle in a brass kind of cylinder. As and when the flammable gases built up too much from the miners' work, the candle would go out. And then the miners would know to leave the area, much more scalable than canaries. And they would immediately leave the mine. It would make the workers safer. And also it gave them progress in terms of that innovation. So unlocking that potential so that they could unlock coal mining and they could continue to power innovation. And so that's essentially what we want to do for the agentic revolution. We want to help businesses to know where they have AI agents, what they're capable of, what they're doing, how that translates to risk and exposure, and how they can proactively mitigate that risk.
Very cool. So speaking of AI agents, before we talk more about risk, what are some great use cases you've seen with your clients without revealing anything secret, of course?
Gosh, there's so many really interesting ones, all the way from financial services. I've seen a really cool merger and acquisition agent that does a lot of briefs and does a lot of market analysis and, total addressable market and all sorts of really fun financial measures, over to drug discovery. There are current statistics that say companies that are using agents for drug discovery have cut the typical time down from 10 years to 3. And that is intensely shaping the way that not only new trials can start, but also the realistic materials and the ways that you can start to think about supply chain dependencies and the way that you can make it more sustainable from an ecological impact. All of that is possible with agents. I met with a French company that are using agents to build molecules, which I think is one of the coolest things that I've ever heard of. And they're using biological research all the way through to, there are agents who are organizing diaries. So every time they have a meeting, they not only take notes, take the action items away, but then reorganize the calendar of the person who had the meeting based on those priorities as they shift throughout the day. So there's kind of everything under the sun when it comes to agents.
That's pretty cool. And obviously we have to think about, you mentioned the Lex Luthors of the world earlier. What kinds of risks or misuse worry you the most? And how do you think we can guard against that?
Yeah, I mean, take a technological innovation and you'll find someone who's trying to use it for ill, just as you'll find someone who's trying to use it for good. I think the more interesting thing with agents is their decision making. So the very thing that makes them agentic, their autonomy, the way that they are delegated decisional authority and the way that they choose things, which is different from previous automation where the decisions were already determined and pre-taken. So the thing that worries me the most is actually that people aren't thinking enough about these decision-making entities and how their own behavior, without any manipulation or without any external third-party contact, could have unexpected consequences or could have especially negative impacts. Because the thing with agents is that most of the time when they misbehave, they're not necessarily malicious, but they lack context. Now, obviously, you're going to have malicious examples. You'll always have people from a cyber perspective who are trying to exploit agents for their own gains. But I'm more interested in the piece that seems unaddressed, which is largely the agent's own behavior.
Yeah, super interesting. And then in terms of the security or cybersecurity side, model context protocol is out there. A lot of people are talking about it. It's not really a secure protocol on its own. Like, what's the solution there?
I think expecting it to be a secure protocol on its own is potentially unhelpful in the way that, the internet is full of insecure protocols. Like we'll probably never get to net zero in terms of it's perfectly safe. Now everyone go use it. I think it's much more about how do we make it safe as we build it and fly it? How do we put measures in place to have visibility, to be able to govern MCP? So model context protocol is just one protocol, but like APIs are still really important to agents. They, no pun intended, are the bedrock of how they operate. And so thinking all the way up from APIs to MCPs to eventually agent to agent communications. So I think all these different protocols, of course you want to build security in by design. Of course you want to have good principles and guardrails around how you use them. But I think if you're waiting for them to be perfect before you dabble, I don't know that we'll get there. It's sort of about how do you make it the safest possible for the moment that you're operating in.
Yeah, super. And additionally, we've also got to think about AI ethics, right? So this is something that often gets short shrift. People are focused on cool use cases and, okay, well, let's make it secure. Ethics is a little bit more of a gray area, right? So if you could design the perfect ethical AI framework for agents, what's one principle you'd make non-negotiable?
It's a really tough question. I think multiple judgments in problem solving would be really critical. And what I mean by that is everyone will define ethics differently. Some will put an S on it, some won't. So the idea of how exactly that's going to fit into a specific situation or paradigm, especially in one decision moment, so one specific level of judgment, is really, really hard to get not only agreement on from a standards perspective, but also to be well fit across all these different problems that you're solving. So I think every problem has to have multi-step, both solutionizing and checks in terms of how you actually go about solving it. So I think it's kind of multiple judgment layers across an ethics perspective, and also ideally a lot of diversity of thought plugged in, but I know that's technically too.
Yeah. And look, you've worked with a lot of different senior people, IT, risk management, security. What's the biggest concern you're hearing from them right now about AI adoption?
I think the things they're most familiar with are kind of perennial security problems around identity and data loss. So not being able to 100% confirm how an agent's identity is going to be shaped, especially when you compare it to a workflow or some of the non-human identity pieces that are coming about. But I think security teams are really aware of identity controls and how that has been a continuous challenge for humans across organizations, let alone digital employees. And I think from a data perspective, the last few years have been spent with a constant drumbeat of generative AI will lose data, generative AI will expose private information, And so I think people are really aware of the risks of data within AI systems. I think they're still largely less aware of how training data works across various disciplines of AI, and how important it is versus how much you can add other controls or other kind of fine tuning atop it. But I think the things that they're most aware of are identity and data loss. I think the things that they are still less clear about is how that necessarily translates to agents that can make decisions.
Yeah, absolutely. So you've got your psychology degree. Behavioral risks often get overlooked compared to technical ones. Can you share an example of how human behavior can make or break AI governance?
Yeah, 100%. So, one thing I've been talking about a lot lately is the human in the loop savior complex. And so, basically, we always talk about human in the loop as like a super helpful constraint, which it is. But imagine you and I, Alec, are put in front of the same readout, and we're both going to make a judgment over whether or not it's safe. It's very unlikely that A, our judgment would be exactly the same, and that B, our judgment would be equitable in the sense that we would have the exact same amount of context and information and expertise
Mm-hmm.
to make it valuable. And so one of the things that's most important to me is kind of thinking through the controls that we put in place where humans are in the loop or where humans are in controlling systems, and really thinking through the realities of human behavior, that not all humans are going to have the exact same reaction. In some scenarios, an AI output might be better than a human intervention. And so really being thoughtful about not planning for the perfect game. I used to see this a lot in cybersecurity where you kind of design every control as if it's all going to work perfectly, and you don't necessarily account for human behavior. So, there's rain on the pitch, there's mud everywhere, and from a human perspective, that could be people not reading everything, people forgetting something, the implicit trust we put in technology. I always talk about it as like a bus metaphor. You get on a bus, you don't ask how long the driver's had a license, if there's air in the tires, or if there's fuel in the bus. You just get on and expect it to get you from A to B. And until it breaks down, you trust it. And it's basically the same with technology, where by human trust, we have explicit trust. So you have to prove to me that I can trust you, and we build that over time. But technology, we rely on it. It goes into the background almost of how we think about things. And so until something goes wrong, we won't even know to think about something going wrong. And so it's really about that implicit trust piece and planning out how humans are going to interact with your AI systems.
Wow, that's amazing. So kind of shifting gears to becoming a founder, you said earlier that becoming a founder was a completely different experience from being an employee. What was the biggest adjustment you had to make in that transition?
Yeah, I think some of it is how you think about time, because there's always a million things that you can do as a founder. I'm sure you'll relate to this, that you could think of 11 different things that you could occupy the same space of time with. So really choosing the best job for this moment becomes a very critical skill. I think the other thing about it is you have license to solve any problem you choose. So you can end up solving every problem, and you can end up expanding your scope so much that if you're not careful and you don't have other people on the journey with you who can sort of give you better perspective, you can start to think of all the amazing things that you could build and you could solve, and really staying close to actually, this is what the customer needs. This is a problem that we're solving, and this is why we're solving it. I think, you could talk about a million things in founder life that are really different. I haven't altered my routine. I haven't started cold plunging. I don't have a new gilet collection. I don't have any of the Allbirds trainers yet. So that's still, I have a bench worn out for my arrest on that. But other than that, I think the biggest change has been how you think about time, and also how much you care about the people that you're bringing with you. Like, one of the most important things to me is that our employees look back and say, this was the best experience of my career. Like, I made an absolutely huge impact. I made a world-shaking decision when I came to Geordie, and it was the best time of my career. Like, I really want people to say that.
Awesome. So talk a little bit more about the company.
Yeah, so we were founded earlier this year. We are essentially focused on AI agent risk management for the enterprise. As I said, we try to help businesses answer a couple of key questions. Where do I have AI agents, whether I'm building them or buying them or running them? So that could be everything from Cursor to Microsoft Copilot to, Salesforce or Zendesk. And then once I know where I have those agents, what are they capable of? What jobs can they do? What functions can they perform? What tools do they have? And then what are they actually getting up to every day? So behavioral observability, what do they do day to day? How do I keep track of that from an operational perspective? And how does that translate to my risk exposure? How does any of that relate to business risk? How does it relate to cyber risk? How does it relate to financial risk? And then how do I proactively mitigate that? So we have a proprietary technology, which we call Beam, which basically helps you to contextually engineer AI agents to make better decisions over time. So we really want to help businesses to unlock the potential of AI agents. I think it's not just the one lever for us of risk, it's also about innovation. And so many times security teams want to say yes, they want to enable innovation, but there's just too many unknowns. There's too many risks. It's not clear enough exactly how this is going to not only work, but also benefit the business. And so we really want to help partner not only with security teams, but also closer with the business to achieve their innovation goals by understanding practically what AI agents actually do, how they're solving problems for the business, and how you can get return on that investment.
Yeah, great advice. And then finally, if you had to give one piece of advice to someone just starting their journey as a founder in the AI space, what would it be?
Gosh, I would say uh, start talking to other founders, not necessarily about what you're doing, but about what they're doing in terms of their practices, the times that they wake up, the things that they're sacrificing. Because I think you can very easily get lonely or get into kind of a bubble of you may know one person who's a founder and so they do this thing and so I have to do this thing, especially multiple time founders. You can kind of try to copy paste their experience into your own. I think once you talk to a lot of founders, you realize that we're all building this as we fly it. We're all figuring it out. So nobody has the secret recipe of success. There are best practices that can save you time. There is advice that you can get around where to make good hiring decisions, what tools to use, etc. But a lot of it is going to be specific to you and your own experience. So hopefully just have people to talk to, have people to kind of vent things about, and also get a reality check of like, you're not the only one who's struggling as a founder. Everybody struggles. It's one of the hardest things. You're pushing a boulder up a hill, but hopefully it's a really valuable boulder at the end of it.
Awesome. Yeah, great advice. Yeah, and you mentioned Venus Williams before the show as your favorite athlete. What about her journey or approach inspires you the most?
Yeah, I think so much of it is tenacity and a continued drive to not only push yourself to be the best and your best, but also to overcome. I think so often when you talk about kind of athletes and who's the most important, you don't always talk about people who are not only underrepresented in their own category, but who are also have a lot of scrutiny around what they do, how they conduct business, what they think about, how their routines work. And she's always been someone, as with her sister, who's an outlier in tennis, who is often expected to show up now and dominate. But initially that was not the case. That was not it when she first kind of started out. So I think so much of it is really not allowing external opinions to completely cloud how you're going to enter the world, and also taking inspiration from unique sources. So yeah, she's lovely. She's super inspiring.
And as we think about AI and agentic AI, what's something that you know for sure that most people out there don't know or might even think the opposite?
Oh, really difficult. Uh, AI agents don't have to use LLMs. I think that's one of the most common misconceptions, is that if it's an AI agent, it has to use a large language model as its reasoning center. And that's absolutely not the case. I spent 4 years at Darktrace, and that whole product is an agentic system. So autonomous detection and response, the autonomous piece is the key. And so, yeah, it doesn't have to have a large language model as the reasoning core. There's all sorts of AI applications that could eventually evolve into an agentic system. It's more about how it takes action. How capable is it of making decisions, of interpreting context, ideally of planning and executing those actions, and also critiquing itself. But I think there's a lot of questions around, especially if you've looked at the human agency scale from Stanford, like how autonomous does it have to be an agent? And also, does it have to use a large language model? Because everybody right now is, there's been a lot of investment there over the last few years. We need to turn some of that into some exciting new technology. So it doesn't have to be a large language model at the core of an AI agent.
Yeah, it totally makes sense. Well, now we shift into our last section where I mention things and you tell us if you think they're underrated or overrated, and maybe a sentence or two why. So we're going to kick it off with the Oxford-Cambridge boat race. Underrated or overrated?
Underrated. It's amazing. You have to go to BUMS. It's fantastic. And go Cambridge.
The TV show Gilmore Girls. Underrated or overrated?
Underrated. You could never rate it appropriately. It's a 10. It's a 50 out of 10. It's so good.
Knitting as a hobby. Underrated or overrated?
Underrated. It's so calming. I think it's like, if you were to put me in a box of like the commonalities that I have across age groups, I would definitely be in the 60+ box. Like, I like gardening, I like knitting, but knitting is so nice. Like, if you want another activity, don't go on your phone when you're watching TV. Knit. You can chaos knit. Like, it doesn't have to resemble anything. You could just knit a big square, but it is so soothing. It's really lovely.
Awesome. Groove and soul music. Underrated or overrated?
Criminally underrated. Honestly, groove and soul music is probably the thing that nobody knows about me. Is it's one of my favorite genres. If I am in a bad mood and I want to pick myself up, I will listen to the Bee Gees, actually. So.
That is very funny. Perfume as personal identity. Underrated or overrated?
Everything's underrated, apparently. Underrated. I absolutely believe in this. There's like a scent that is associated with you. And I could take it back to pheromones. I won't. But there's a lot of reasons from biological and historical perspective that it makes sense to have kind of a scent that is representative of who you are.
Being a command and control leader as opposed to a servant leader, underrated or overrated?
I would say overrated. I think there's a lot of illusory control that we put into our lives and elements that we think we're in control of that we absolutely have no influence over. So I think as much as I am a recovering control freak, I think you probably want to put the mallet down and instead pick up some notebook pages and start to listen.
Public speaking as a professional skill, underrated or overrated?
I would say overrated because I think a lot of people think that it's the difference between a career that is completely successful and a career that has no success whatsoever. And it's just not true. You may have a ton of success and nobody knows about it. So it might just be the public facing side of your career. I think if you want to have that as a skill, it's super helpful. But I think sometimes it's treated as like the unlock for the full potential of your life. And it's really not. Like, I think it's a great skill to have, but it's not going to be the thing that stops you from greatness if you're already great or if you're on your way to becoming great.
Yeah, absolutely. How about use of AI in creative fields like art or music or fragrance, underrated or overrated?
I'm going to say overrated only because it gets a lot of press. It gets a lot of publicity. I think the one area would be perfume. So I actually did this. I built an agent to help me find the perfect scent of perfume. And let me tell you, I did a great job, jolly good job. So I think there's a lot of fun new ways that you can use AI in a creative way. I don't think it replaces human art. I don't think it replaces human music. I've never heard an AI song that I personally like, but that's probably because we're new into it. You know, they've got to have time. But I think it's slightly overrated in the sense that pretty much immediately when you talk about especially generative AI, you start talking about the creative arts and how it's going to shape those. And I think that there's still a huge space for human ingenuity.
And then finally, the Lord of the Rings extended edition as opposed to the normal one, underrated or overrated?
Criminally underrated. It's an 11 out of 10. It's so good. And honestly, the best trick is if you haven't seen the extended edition a bunch of times to watch it because you'll notice the differences. Now, obviously, I'm a chief AI officer, so you might have started this going, is she a nerd? Is she not a nerd? I am. But I will say it is absolutely a game changer if you've not seen it.
Awesome. And tell the audience a little bit about how they can find more information about Geordie AI.
Absolutely. So you can go to our website, geordie.ai. I had to make sure I spelled that right. You can go to my LinkedIn. You can go to Geordie's LinkedIn. You can go to any of the co-founders' LinkedIn. So Henry Comfort and Benji Weber. Chris is our COO. He's based in New York. All have great information about the team. We're about 17 strong now, so you could also visit any one of our lovely team's LinkedIns. And please feel free to reach out. We're always interested in chatting to people. And most importantly, we really want to build AI agent risk management for customers. So if we can help in any way, we're super happy to chat.
Awesome. Hannah, thanks for coming on the show. This has been Hannah Darley, co-founder and chief AI officer at Geordie AI. Thanks, Hannah.
Thank you.